It's 6 o'clock.
All right, good evening, everyone.
Evening.
Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Council President Robert J. Sylvia.
Here.
Vice President Paul M. Rodrigues.
Here.
Councilor Terry Flynn.
Here.
Councilor M. Teresa Santos.
Yeah.
Councilor Dennis B. Toronto.
Here.
Councilor Barbara A. Von Villis. Councilor Thomas P. Welch III.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. President.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us with the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag.
Pledge
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the
United States of America,
to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Item number 1. Discussion of short-term rentals in the town and matters related thereto. 1A, memorandum of the town administrator, RE, short-term rentals, municipal court. 1B, memorandum of the town administrator, RE, calls for service, short-term rentals. 1C, memorandum of the town administrator, complete list of registered units. 1D, memorandum of the town administrator, user-free calculation, short-term rentals. 1E, memorandum of the town administrator, short-term rentals, proposed new fees, physical impact statement. 1F, memorandum of the town administrator, hotel tax. 1G, the item was previously on March 1st, 2020, regular meeting agenda, no action taken on that date. Memorandum of Council Wealth, short-term rental registration fee.
Mr. President, I am recusing from this item.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Toronto.
Recusing myself from this issue.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Madam Clerk, you have that?
Yes.
Okay, Vice President.
Motion to receive memorandum A through G and begin said discussion of short-term rentals in the town and matters related thereto.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I asked our special item solicitor, Marissa Desital, to go to give us a lead-in tonight to this. And I asked her that if she could just, this is more, I guess, for people for the first time tonight, a recap of how we got to where we are tonight. And I also think it's important, again, to hear it one more time how ordinances are enacted in the town of Middletown. So Marissa, if you could start, I'd appreciate it. And thank you for being with us again tonight.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. I'd previously shared a Word document with Mr. Brown, who indicated that there was a way to make the document appear on everyone's screen. Is that still possible?
You have,
Yes, the clerk should be putting it on. There you go.
Perfect. Thank you. So the document that you have in front of you is a pretty basic explanation of what the town is required to do in terms of ordinance revision, as well as what the town is doing on top of what's required in order to obtain as much stakeholder input and to make the process as public as possible. So first of all, there has been no motion made on the short-term rental ordinance revision and no votes taken on anything to date. The meetings that we had and the meeting tonight is very preliminary. The town is not at a point where it is ready to make a motion or to take a vote on any revision to the ordinance. The public was made aware of the draft changes to the ordinance and the agenda from the previous meeting. However, the public awareness was only to begin a conversation about what the town could do in this instance. So the council and I just want to make clear that this is a public process and the town is not going to move forward without being clear and transparent as to what their intentions are and the best way to get to that goal. So tonight's meeting was scheduled as a special meeting, obviously, to try to put forth an opportunity for stakeholders to ask questions, the town council to ask questions, and everyone to have an open conversation about what the issues are with respect to short-term rentals. Following the meeting tonight, the council will consider everything that is said as it usually does. There will be continued opportunity for the stakeholders to continue to assist the town council with the best next steps. And the next step after the open and transparent public process that we're having, ultimately, if the council decides that it wants to make a revision to the existing ordinance, would be to vote in a public forum with an opportunity for people to attend, whether it's virtual or in person. There has to be at least 2 public meetings on the revision to the ordinance, and then the council votes on it. Again, all of that is done in public. All of these steps have to, or the town is providing for all of these steps to make sure that everyone is on the same page before the ordinance, if an ordinance is drafted, before it goes into effect. And so again, I'd just like to say that the purpose of tonight's meeting is not to vote. It's to have a discussion between council members and all interested parties on how best to meet the objectives that the town has with respect to short-term rentals.
Okay. Marissa, thank you very much. I appreciate that. You could take the slide down if you would. Okay, before we get going tonight, I'd like to just make a few comments, if I may. And I say this with all sincerity, to friends and my colleagues. I'd like to offer just a few comments. As most of you know, because you've been party to them, I've spoken with many residents and business people about the issue. I've also read more emails than I can count in regards to this one item. But it's an important issue. From the beginning, I approached this short-term rentals with an open mind in an attempt to come up with the fairest policy possible. First, I think it's important to commend everyone for their decorum and willingness to listen to other perspectives. Out of this conversation, and it has been a true conversation, we all have a much better understanding of the breadth and complexity of the short-term rental situation, myself included. I don't want to forget the results of our community survey that we did, which presented a number of benefits to short-term rentals, to include boosting the economy, providing families an affordable option to stay in Middletown, to name a few. But we can't forget the distractions either. The noise, the trash, and the unseemly behavior periodically. Saying that, there's no one answer to address short-term rentals in Middletown. One solution might be welcomed by some, but seen as a draconian by others. With that in mind, we have to find a compromise that works for everyone. Small steps, if you may, before you decide to run, if that's necessary. Therefore, at that end, I'm going to throw this out, and this is not going to be a motion, but I'm going to throw this out as just my personal perspective tonight, and I'll explain to you why I'm doing this. After listening to a lot of people and speaking to a lot of people, I would like to propose, and again, this is not a motion, official motion, not a motion, a $75 annual flat fee to register all owner-occupied short-term rental properties in Middletown. If an owner lives on a piece of property, so one flat fee is $75. As for non-owner occupied units, my proposal, and again, this is just my proposal, proposing a $300 flat fee. That's it. No more confusing calculations based on bedrooms and other difficult to understand metrics. 75 and 300 fees are it. With the new money raised from these fees, my estimates show we're able to generate 75%, not totally, of the revenue needed to pay for our enhanced short-term rental enforcement program, which would be a part-time program that would coordinate with our police department, coordinate with the short-term rental stakeholders and the community itself. This man or woman would work closely with every operator, the neighbors and the zoning department especially, to get a better handle on short-term rentals and preserve the quality of life in our neighborhoods. The remainder of the course of this program, I believe, can be paid for through the new registration fees associated with unregistered short-term rentals, something that remains a problem in some neighborhoods. There will always be, we're going to put together a clear set of instructions for our town staff, and we spoke about that, to handle short-term rental compliance and concerns as we move into the summer of 2021. And hopefully this won't be a COVID-19 year. I think we need to put out and make sure it gets disseminated an easy to understand handbook of all things short-term rentals in Middletown and the processing that's put together, and one that will help spell out the rules for everyone clearly to be understood. We've heard the message that we can do better as a town, and we will do better to help short-term rentals be more part of the fabric of the Middletown family, and they should be. They bring a lot to the table. With all this in mind, I just wanted to put that out there. Those are my thoughts tonight. And I'd like to put that out there. And I put that out there early tonight for this reason. We have over 40 some people that have signed up to speak tonight, over 40 people. And hopefully, and it's worked in the past where, and I'm going to open this up to my colleagues in a minute so they can put their thoughts, any thoughts that they have at this point together, that maybe some of the callers that sent us emails that are here to speak again tonight, maybe be in agreement with some of our thought process. And but I will afford everybody an opportunity to talk tonight. I think we're probably going to have to look at giving everybody like 3 minutes. Again, we have over 40 some people that want to speak tonight. So I look forward to hearing from fellow council members to go over their thoughts. And maybe on a consolidated basis, we could later put a motion together that would be amicable and acceptable to everybody. So with that, do I have any colleagues that would like to express their thoughts at this time? Council Welch.
Hi, thank you, Mr. President, and I would like to express my thoughts. I will also like to thank Marissa because that was helpful. I think that was good to get that out in front and understand the process. It helped me. I'm sure it helped others. I have two things to say. The first, we all got an email, and maybe this will go to what you said, President Sylvia. I would like to read its short letter from the short-term rental operators of Middletown, who are now calling themselves STROM. And it says, Dear Council, in recent discussions around the town's existing short-term rental ordinances have been engaging and heavily debated as of late. And for the first time, inspired short-term rental owners have come together, forming a cohesive group, STROM, meeting independently and aggregating their collective expertise with a singular goal in mind to help the town with the complex issues surrounding the short-term rentals. Nationwide, cities and towns are being challenged with the strong growth of short-term rentals. They're all evaluating the pros and cons and trying their best to sort out the most critical aspect, enforcement of ordinances, just what we're talking about here tonight. Over the past month here in Middletown, it's been established that the vast majority of short-term rental operators are doing things right, adhering and enforcing the current town ordinance. Only a few appear to ignore them. As responsible owners and members of STROM, we fully embrace this opportunity to work with the council law enforcement, zoning, and perhaps most importantly, our neighbors. We are a valued, educated resource, and we're here to help. As responsible experts in the businesses who genuinely care about our community, we would have rather been asked to assist the council and town officials on how to improve the few problems that have been identified. Unfortunately, here we are forced to defend ourselves against unjust fees to prop up expensive initiatives that lack both evidence and confidence when it comes to resolving the underlying problem, enforcement. To quote Vice President Paul Rodricks in a recent town council meeting, "We need to figure out where the gap is between zoning and police, and it should be an easy solution," end quote. If the council wishes, we can choose option one. It's their option one. Debate the shortfalls and unintended consequences of the current approach, something that's difficult to do effectively in 3-minute sound bites from the public. Unreasonably increasing registration fees 9-fold from $55 to $500 per bedroom, hiring a full-time officer, not prioritizing registering the unregistered, investing little to no time finding a solution to enforce gaps, and prioritizing what our police chief has already admitted is a very minor issue. Or if the council would prefer, they consider option two. Focus on trying to solve this very small but complex problem by doing the following. Reward possible short-term rental owners, it's 95% of us. Provide guidance on reasonable short-term rental penalties for the very few bad apples with an escalating scale for repeat offenders. Create a plan in which the short-term rental community can self-regulate. Assist zoning and law enforcement with enforcement gaps. Strom highly recommends option number 2 and suggests that a task force be formed as quickly as possible and prior to any changes to the current ordinances. The issues at hand are complex and cannot be solved without constructive back and forth conversation and discussion. We implore the council to create this task force that would provide a level playing field and offer those with experience and expertise a voice. We ask that you consider our representation from the following groups: zoning, the town council, law enforcement, many strong members as experts in the business, and a couple of Middletown citizens that are non-short-term owners. In summary, Strom is ready and willing to do the work and to help the council navigate these complex issues. We want to help our community grow together and not apart. Thank you for your time and consideration. Sincerely, Strom, short-term rental operators of Middletown. And then my own thoughts, if I may.
Go right ahead.
Okay. I'm calling this the short-term rental ordinance journey. This is just my opinion. Being a new council, I will admit that I did not have a good grasp of the short-term situation in town. Based on newspaper articles and agenda items, it appeared to be obvious that short-term rentals had historically created havoc in our neighborhoods and caused costly overtime demands on our public service. The January 19th meeting, the first document that provided insight to the perceived problem was the town survey. A quick recap: 234 survey participants, overwhelmingly Middletown residents. More than 70% don't operate a short-term rental but live near one. 49% agreed they were good for the town, 38% did not. We heard short-term rentals help support local businesses, restaurants, stores, employ local tradespeople, provide families an alternative to the high cost of hotels, don't use the school system, which is the biggest cost to the town. The short-term rental cons included noise, parking, trash, etc. When asked to suggest improvements, the word enforcement was written 96 times out of the 190 people who offered an opinion. I made my wife go through and count. It seemed as everything was pointing to the issue of enforcement, so I threw out the idea of a full-time position be created to identify unregistered short-term rentals, perform annual inspections, and serve as a point person for information and complaints. February 16th meeting, after public requests for relative data, Middletown Police provided logs of noise and parking calls from the past 3 summers. Using the logs from 2019, as it was the last summer prior to COVID, there were 83 noise complaints, and I compared the addresses to the short-term rental registration list and found that 22 of those complaints were to short-term rental properties, which means that 3/4 of the calls were to non-short-term rental properties. On the parking side, the numbers were even more skewed, as only 8 of the 204 complaints were at short-term rentals, less than 4%. The town had no overtime information with respect to short-term rentals. I suggested at the time the salary for the short-term rental officer should be in the mid $60,000 range, and pointed to the approximate $25,000 that came in registration fees, the capture and registration of the possible 150 unregistered properties, plus the 1% room tax money kicked back to the town from the state would more than pay for the position. Subsequently, I learned a full-time short-term rental officer's position cost must include benefits, overtime, vehicle expenses, office space, administrative help, etc. The almost $25,000 the town collects from the registration fee goes into the general fund. The 1% state hotel tax goes directly to the town's unfunded pension liability, a decision that the council at the time signed off on. And that if you violate the noise ordinance, you are issued a citation to appear in court, not a ticket. I didn't know that. After further investigation of town data, talking to town officials, and hearing from a multitude of residents, a few more pieces of the puzzle became clear. Only 7 people paid fines and fees due to short-term rental violations over the past 5 years. The total collected was just over $2,800 in 5 years. I'm having a hard time understanding how that's even possible. Hopefully, the appointment of Judge Holbrook will pull the municipal court back on track. There's a group of short-term rental owners that have rallied together to speak up. They include a number of smart, successful people that want to ensure that short-term rentals are given a fair shake. They have some great ideas and insight to the discussion. This group has offered their help and expertise to suggest changes to the ordinance and to make it easier to enforce and easier to adhere to. They have the knowledge and ability to help identify the unregistered properties, and I think we should take them up on their offer. There's a number of corrective measures in queue ready to be implemented by Chief Kewer this season, including the hiring of public safety auxiliary interns, 2 of which will be dedicated to preemptive noise patrols, addressing parking violations, etc. And an added benefit, which I thought was great to this program, is that the interns are, these guys are interested, and girls are interested in law enforcement field. So we get a chance to let them experience all that Middletown has to offer while they're working alongside our police department. I think it's a great incentive. The recycling coordinator, in conjunction with Middletown Police, will address the trash can issue prior to the start of the summer season to increase compliance. Adjustments to the police department and municipal court interface and amending the ordinance to require minimum fines could provide for a more efficient judicial process and increase the monies collected by the town. I would also like to change the focus of these discussions from short-term rentals to summer issues. As we now know, the additional pressure on town services during the tourist season is not due solely or predominantly from short-term rental properties. I still believe the summer issues officer is a key component of the answer we seek. I think it is important to have one point of contact for information requests, complaints to be logged, data to be collected, and inspections performed. The position is needed during the summer season, perhaps 6 months. By law, a municipality can charge a fee for a particular service that benefits the fee payer in a manner not shared by other members of society. There must be a choice to pay the fee for service or not. A fee compensates the municipality for expenses providing the service. It is not to raise revenue. The $55 per unit charge currently originated from the administration cost of the annual inspection. The short-term rental also pays the hotel tax. The town continues to get these 2 revenue streams from short-term rental owners. Because the payments are allocated to pension liabilities or put to the general fund is no reason to ask for more money. Currently, the noise and parking data we have to look at shows that the short-term rentals only comprise a small percentage of the calls, so they should not be unfairly targeted. Perhaps the most equitable way forward is to hire someone in the zoning office to work on these summer tourist season issues, Memorial Day through Labor Day, and on building zoning enforcement for the other 6 or 8 months of the year. In summary, I am confident the short-term renters are not the villainous demon here. I think we've seen that we can do a better job of enforcing the rules that we already have. And there are measures in place at the direction of Chief Cure to make it happen. That is not to say that there are not tweaks to the ordinance that could help. I believe we can do the best job if we have a town employee who oversees all summer issues, which includes coordinating short-term rental ordinance enforcement and inspections. I think the short-term rental owners are an untapped resource. A committee of these and other stakeholders can provide valuable insight to ordinance amendments, the ability to identify unregistered properties, and methods of collecting and tracking data points. It's a win-win. They want to be portrayed in the best possible light, and the town wants to prosper from their economic stimulus while safeguarding the right of all residents to enjoy their property. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President.
Geez, I don't know how I follow that up. Good job, Tom. So my thoughts are, as I look at Bob, I was quickly running, some of the numbers you put out. And maybe I'm wrong, but I'm coming up with, based on the numbers that we were provided of owner occupied at 39 owner occupied units and 139.
103.
103 rather, which only comes up to 142. And the numbers to me are just, I'm not sure, I hate to say this, I'm not sure I trust the numbers totally, because we were told a few meetings back, we have 183 or 186 or 198 was thrown out there. And I went through and counted every one of those 3 times on those sheets, and I kept coming up with 143. So I just want to know if 143 is the number, is the actual number of registered owner occupied and non-owner occupied short-term rentals.
Okay, the number that I used in my math was 103 and 39.
Okay.
And that's the number that was afforded to me. And I'm going to ask Mr. Brown if he wants to comment on that, but that's the number that was afforded to me, which generates about less than $34,000 in revenue, which is, again, doesn't fully fund the part-time position, but it certainly almost funds the part-time position, a 6-month position for the summer.
Okay, so thank you. That's what I wanted to know. Also, as far as the position goes, the more information that we gathered as we went through this this journey with short-term rentals and the emails and the ideas and the facts that came out, the clearer facts that came out, I'm not sure there's a need. My own personal opinion is I'm not sure there's a need for a full-time, at least not to start. I don't think there's a need for a full-time position. I think this should be, an April through September, May through October type position where that's what they're dedicated to. I think if we start putting them towards other things, they're going to be working on other things, as far as in the zoning office. I think that part-time person, it's my own opinion, should be dedicated solely to working with the STROM, to finding, identifying unregistered short-term rentals, to enforcement, to follow up with the building official, obviously, and that includes, I'm sure, some court time if there's some violators. I do believe that we should look at adding maybe a little language to that proposal, owner occupied, because short-term rentals are one of the things we found out for sure is they're done so differently. there's no cookie cutter for a short-term rental. You know, one person might rent for 2 or 3 times for the summer. Somebody does it as an investment. Somebody does it just enough to pay their taxes. Somebody does it they do it for all various reasons, and that's okay. But there's no cookie cutter. So, you know, to kind of blanket everybody like we started to do, we certainly, I was educated throughout the process. And, you know, I always believe when you've got a hot issue right now, it's short-term rentals and it's senior housing and, you know, good things, even though, you know, you go through the process and things sometimes get not heated, but, you know, tough discussions happen. Good things usually come out of that, you know, and what I see coming out of here, what struck me last meeting was when Chris Souza spoke and he said, you know, we're organizing, which was great, and we want to assist the town and work with the town. And because, you know, one of the things that happens is you start dividing neighborhoods and you start dividing the town, nothing good ever comes of that. And that's not a good direction for the town to be in or to go in. So that stuck with me, and I thought that was refreshing. But going back to the position, I think it needs to be a part-time position to start.
That was the funding proposal, Paul.
Yeah.
That was the funding proposal, only for 6 months.
No, I understand that, but Tom is still talking about a full-time,
Oh, okay.
at least that's what I got out of it, a full-time position.
See, I didn't get that out of his conversation.
Okay.
I got
Okay.
a part-time too. And
Okay.
is that correct,
Then-
Council Welch?
That's correct. I did say that. I started with that, Paul, because that's what I said in the past.
Okay.
I started with that. Now I'm back to, you know,
6
4
months.
6 months,
Okay.
whatever. Yeah.
But I do think that, you know, and I was trying to over the weekend, as I was reading through the information packet that we received, I was trying to come up with numbers based on owner occupied, just like you did, Bob, versus non-owner occupied. I think if we get too deep in the weeds on we charge per room and, you know, I think we just come up, I think flat fee is probably the way to go. A reasonable flat fee, but I also think it needs to pay for itself. You know, we can always come back and modify this. I don't think we should, you know, I don't know what that number is. I'm not sure, you know, do we include interns and where did that come from? Is that what they're really going to be doing, or are they going to be doing something else? And is this just to pay for that? I don't get a good feel about that. I'd like to see, you know, I'd like to see that number from, I got it down that 147. I got it down to about $60,000. So, you know, that's a part-time person, you know, with no benefits. You know, as far as a vehicle, if we get new vehicles, a new vehicle or two for the police department, if we go to surplus one, why do they have to have another new vehicle? If it's only a part-time position, use it like they used to, a used police car, you know? So I took that 10,000 out. I took out the 2 interns at 16,000. The part-time position, you know, I guesstimated the best I could. So I got it down to about 60,000 total right now. That's just me doing my math. You know, so if your proposal pays for, you know, 34,000 of that, you know, we're still short. I'm not sure that's the way we should go about it. And I appreciate your proposal, but I think, you know, we've always budgeted to pay as we go. Now, if the short term, just like when we hired host compliance, we thought we were going to get all these unregistered short-term rentals identified, and we didn't. So now if we put a part-time person in place, let's see what we get. And if we get that, then we certainly can revisit it and go, okay, you know, now we found, you know, 50 or 100 more, just like we did with the pay-as-you-throw trash program. You know, it started off, we tried to get that thing to self-fund and it didn't work. So we had to put in a fee. So as we got more people signed up, we reduced the fee. You know, we'll try and continue to do that. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I think a lot of good things, a lot of good conversation, a lot of good dialogue. And I appreciate everyone's input.
Okay, thank you. And again, my thought process was, to clearly understand my thought process, I clearly said that I didn't believe it was going to fund it all. But
I
I
know.
I do believe we're going to generate some additional revenue once we get out there and once we have a whole team of people coordinated and working together. I think we'll have more people registered for permits than we ever had.
No, I agree with the registrations will go up. We don't know what that number is. I just don't think we stop budgeting negative.
Okay. All right, any other councilor like to make any comments? Councilor Santos, then back to
Go
you.
ahead, Vice President. You can, go ahead. You had your hand up. I want to hear what he's got to say.
I would rather say, hey, let's put the fee where we break even with the expenses. And then if we generate more, then we reduce it versus, oh, we didn't generate what we thought we were going to generate. We got to come back now. We got to raise it more. That's not, to me, going to go over very well.
Councilor Santos, you ready to talk?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I like Paul's ideas, $60,000, no benefits, part-time, no interns, and use the police cars that go out for surplus. Now, this part-time position, I do hope that we get somebody from Middletown, not off the island, be a Middletown resident. Over the weekend, just like everybody else, you spent most of your time reading emails. Some of them were good. Some of them had very good points. The only problem I have, we do have some people who take pride in the rental property that they have. They check on it. They check up on the people, and they're going to be penalized the same way for not, they're going to be penalized for not living there, but they are watching their tenants. Not everybody does that. There's the good and the bad. So I think we have to be very careful how we weigh this and as we move on. Thank you.
Councilor Welch, and back to you.
So, thank you, Mr. President. I just think, to Paul's point, that I understand where you're going with that. However, I have to come back to the fact that the short-term rental people have already provided revenue. We just decided at some previous point to reallocate it. Now, I know what you're going to say to me. That means then we have to pull it back or whatever the shell game is. But my point is, they are already paying for, if $60,000, enough money from those people is already coming in the pot. We just did something else with it. Now that we want to use it, it's still there. It just went somewhere else. I don't think they should be saddled with trying to make it float. That's all. Thank you.
Vice President.
Well, Tom, I understand that. You want it to come from non-residents or residents? It's going to come from somewhere. So in this case, it's coming from both. The majority of it's coming from non-residents. So that, I understand what you're saying, but we made a decision to fund our pension. If we have a majority of the short-term renters are non-owner occupied, where I don't know how many of those are non-residents, because I'm not sure that number's out there. We just know there's occupied, owner occupied, and non-owner occupied. So if it doesn't come from there, that's going to go back on the residents. And I know a lot of these folks are residents. I get it. So, there needs to be a decision made there. Whatever the council decides, it decides. I just want to make sure your thought process is in line with that or not. One more point I'd like to make about owner occupied is that, and I started to talk about it earlier, then I got off track, was that some of the folks owner occupied, some of them actually live in one unit and they have other units in contiguous lots, and they're right there. So, maybe we can consider consider that? I'm not sure.
I think that was part of the proposal, Vice President, that if they lived on the property, that they would pay the one flat fee. If they didn't live on the property, if they did not live on, it didn't have to be within the same dwelling. We've seen in the same house. If they lived on the property, it'd be the other flat fee.
Understood that, but that's not the same as the contiguous lots.
Understood.
Next lot could have a different, I know one person, a few people that have some that go right in line. There's 2 or 3 lots that they live right there. So,
Well,
you know, how do
personally, I
you?
think that should be a flat fee. That should be a,
Okay.
I mean, that's just my personal feel. If they're there, they're next door, they're there. Counselor Santos.
There are people who do live on the island, but and rent out to short-term rentals. They take pride in their property. They check up on the tenants. They screen the tenants. And I know everybody got a letter from a gentleman that he never leaves the island when he's renting out his property. And if he does, he gets an agent to look out for his property. That's being conscientious of his property and taking care of the property and his neighbors. So I'm tossed between charging him extra and he taking care of the rentals that he does. And he's conscientious of his neighbors. So I don't know, I'm lost.
I can appreciate that, but the line has to get drawn in the sand someplace.
Mm.
You know, you have to draw that line in the sand.
I realize that. Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Brown, Councilor Welch.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. President. One of the things that Paul said too, I just wanted to, I sat down and talked with Chief Cure and Paul, maybe, I don't know if everybody got this part, but they're proposed or it's in the works. I don't know, but there's 6 auxiliary cadets, whatever we're calling them, for the summer, and 2 are going to be just for summer issues, the noise ordinance, like I said before. So those 2 are what is represented by that 16,700 on the spreadsheet from Mr. Brown. And after speaking to the chief, I thought it was a great idea. I would make that part of the program, and I'm probably not doing it justice. And if the chief at some point tonight would to weigh in on that, I got a lot of information from talking to him. Really, like they're on. That was a good part. So, if that were possible.
Okay, Councilor Santos.
Is this the first time we're hearing about these recruits? And are they all Middletowners?
I think that's a separate issue. I'd like to, I mean, it's part of this
Well, Mr.
conversation,
Welch brought it up, sir.
but part of the short-term rental conversation.
All right,
We have 40-some people.
I know.
And I
All
don't
right,
want to weigh in on this.
all right.
But that's why I wanted to get the counselor out there, see if we can get a consolidated feel, how we may want to go.
Okay.
That may satisfy a lot of these callers. It may not. A lot of the callers might be happy with what they've heard so far. Maybe they're not happy with what they've heard so far. But you know something? We have to make a move on this. We have to address this issue. And I think this summer, last summer, and I can't speak for the people that do rent, but I think they probably had an off season last year because of COVID-19. Maybe they didn't, maybe they did. I just have this positive feeling that it's going to be a good season for the short-term rental business in town. But that's just my perception, and I have no real basis for that. It's just speculation, looking at where we're going with COVID. Vice President.
It's good that we're talking about fees, but again, from what we heard and what we've gathered so far, we've touched a little bit on enforcement, potentially. But I think that's where we really need to continue to focus, because when I looked at all the complaints, and then, one of the complaints one of the emails today was, I saw the information, the packet that came out, and, there was noise, there was parking, there was trash, and then there was other. A lot of them were other of those 200, and I think it was 10 issues. One of them was got hit by a dog. A dog got hit by a car or something in that particular area. So, because the lady was upset that, that she was on the report for that, and that wasn't necessarily reflective of what the short-term rental, being a short-term rental issue. So, I think we really need to, I'd like to hear what the people have to say. Obviously, I think we all do, but I think we really need to hone in on enforcement and get their ideas and let's resolve this and get moving on it. And again, to me, it's going to be somewhat fluid. We'll see how it goes this season, and then we revisit it again.
Okay, the purpose again for asking Marissa to outline the ordinance procedure is that if we are in agreement on anything tonight to start to drive this forward, we're going to have 2 public hearings later on. So I think the most important thing to do, people, is let's move on this. We have to do something. So if you have any initial thoughts that you want to throw out, we can do it sooner or we can do it later. Your discretion, but we're going to do something. Any thoughts?
Let's hear what the people have to say.
Okay. Madam Clerk, let's look at about 3 minutes apiece. I know doesn't give everybody a lot of time, but this is simple math when you're doing 40-some people, okay? How long it's gonna take, the process, okay? So, I think what's important tonight is that before we leave here, and hopefully we'll get this done before our curfew, that we can come to agreement on some kind of initial deal or motion that we can put forward. Okay, so, all right. The first person that would like to talk, Christopher Morris. Christopher, are you there? Christopher, good evening. Name and address, please, and you're muted right now.
I'm Chris Morris. I am at 91 Reservoir Road. I'm a member of STROM, and I wanted to bring up a point. I like what I've heard so far this evening, but just wanted to bring up a point on kind of the gap between zoning and policing problems that arise with short-term rentals. Sounds like there's been some valid concerns from people about short-term rentals. But if you're charging the short-term rental owners to pay more in fees, would that ultimately be able to solve that problem if there's a gap in communication and enforcement with zoning and the police? It's our understanding that there's a focus from Middletown Police on managing these issues already, and don't necessarily think a hike in the price of fees is necessary or a legitimate solution to that problem of the gap in communication.
Okay, Chris, I think the thought process was that it would fund a position allocated and dedicated to this, to work with STRONG and to work with the community.
Yes, that would be great. And and I guess I'd like to end with a quick statement if I can.
Go right ahead.
I'd implore the council to create an STR task force, short-term rental task force, that includes short-term rental hands-on experts. We would like to work together around these important issues and craft solutions that help our community grow together. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Dave Dittman.
Can you hear me now?
We can. Name and address, Dave.
My name is Dave Dittman. I live at 44 Ocean View Drive. I've been here about 15 years. And the two things, my background is I've been in the business world for the last 40 years, and I see short-term rentals as good for business in Middletown. That's one of the reasons why I'm here. I'm kind of summarizing my sheet of paper because I want to take half the amount of time. Anyway, I believe short-term rentals are good for business. They're good for the economy here. And there's probably 20, 25 houses out there that are causing all the problems. Most people, when they open up their homes to visitors, they look after the home like it was their home. And in most cases, it is their home. One of the reasons there's two things I wanted to say. Number one, enforcement is the key to this. And I got involved with this thing kind of by myself. I read this article in the newspaper about how all these fees were going up. And I said, gee whiz, I believe in short-term rentals. I think they're good. I'm not doing it. I did it 5 years ago, and I did it very successfully because I went through Airbnb. I listened to people who knew how to run their business, and I had all the controls, and I had no problem. So all I'm saying is it's good for the economy. The second thing is Terry Flynn. I got involved with her about a year ago, and we started. She's a big believer in business and doing things for business here. So we helped a lot of businesses with loans and with grants, helping them determine how to get those. And so I went back out into the community over last Friday and Saturday, and I talked to all my friends who own restaurants. I went into almost 15 different restaurants and talked to owners, and they are all 150% behind short-term rentals. They don't want to see them go away. And anyway, and there's some people that will send you emails and do other things. But the point is that you have a lot of these restaurants that depend heavily on having an increased volume during the summertime. Anyway, I think that's about quickest summary, and I'm within my 3 minutes.
Thanks, David. Tom Parati. Tom. Tom, if you can raise your hand, if you're there, they can bring you up, they can move you. Okay, Tom, are you on?
Hello,
Yes, name and address, Tom.
Tom Parati, 113 Center Avenue. So my letter was referred to, and I think that probably Strom has read it. I know that the council has read it. The town manager has read it. So I'm just going to make a couple of points. I'm liking the tone of what I'm hearing, first of all. I think that we all need to learn to work together. And I think our resolutions are based on common sense, fair play, and consideration for neighbors. Simple as that. And those people who are violating don't get that. When new codes were imposed a couple of years ago, more attention from the police or whatever happened, we got some new codes to put out for our renters, and the fee went up a bit. And I had no problem with that whatsoever. I like working with the town. I like having the police working with us when necessary. So as was said, I am very, very concerned about my neighbors. And so I live 7 minutes away. Like the other millennials, I have moved back to my father's basement. That was a bad joke, thank you. But I'm 7 minutes away, and I have eyes and ears in the neighborhood because I'm not the only one that rents, and we help each other. And I have to say, there's a lot of kids in my neighborhood, but there's no noise. We live on a road. Center Avenue is close to the beach, so you can't park on the street. I'm fortunate to have an 8-car driveway. I advertise it as a 6, but there's no need. And I guess that's about it. I'm willing to pay a reasonable fee. The fee of $500 a bedroom is kind of scary. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Rebecca Clark. Rebecca, if you can raise your hand, Rebecca, we can move you.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Name and address, Rebecca.
Hi, Rebecca Clark, 165 Ellery. I too am a little bit relieved to hear what I'm hearing here from you guys tonight as opposed to what we read. I've been doing this 16 years now, and I started it because I got divorced. It was the only way to keep my home. I am owner occupied. I'm here on the property all the time. I'm very careful. And, you know, seeing the possibility of those of us who are, quote, on the books and above board having to pay exorbitant fees like $500 a bedroom to sort of catch those people who are not in compliance was pretty disappointing. I think we all have gotten the word about property taxes going up and everything else. And I think, as we've said, the great majority of us care about our property, care about our neighbors, and it's those few and far between enforcement issues that are trying for those of us who, you know, I'm a nurse. I drive home at 7:30 in the morning in the middle of July on a Sunday morning because I work nights, and a house up the street has 14 cars and a 4-car driveway. And I think to myself, why is nobody finding that? You know? So, I mean, the enforcement, I think, is the biggest thing. I too am happy to pay a little bit more. I mean, $55 a bedroom is not a lot, but $500 a bedroom is going to cause a lot of us some financial strife. And also, I think if we end up having to pay that much more, those people like myself who only rent a few weeks a year, you're going to end up with some of us short-term renters having to now rent more to cover those extra fees, which nobody wants, I don't think. And thank you, guys.
Thank you, Rebecca. Leon Amaranth. Leon, raise your hand if you're there.
Good evening, council. Can you hear me?
Good evening, Leon. Name and address.
Leon Amarant, 60 Island Drive.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. So I kind of wanted to focus in on the this actual number of short-term rental properties in town, as the number is being used to calculate the registration fees. And like the vice president, the numbers are confusing because we are seeing a lot of different numbers. So I took the time to look at all the data that I had or I could uncover. And you know, the first number is the 143 number that's included in this meeting's agenda. I actually was able to get multiple lists from the town, and this could have been from different years, maybe 2019 and 2020. That's probably what happened. But I was able to come up with 185 distinct registered addresses. So, you know, last year was a COVID year. I'm not sure if the registration could be representative of the actual number just to begin with. But in addition to that, the host compliance data, I looked at the report back in 2019. And in the report, it says 308 identifiable addresses were found with the host compliance data. So that to me says that there are at the time were 308 addresses. And then in my research, I also came across a platform called AirDNA, and that shows 440 listings in the summer of 2020. Now, the number I think is somewhere, the actual number is between 308 and 440. And I would ask the town to look at all this information and come up with a reasonable number of the entire whole of properties doing that are operating as short-term rentals, and use that number in their calculations. And in closing, I do believe that the creation of a short-term rental task force with STROM, which I am a member of at this point, is long overdue to address this question of the number of properties, as well as other questions, and also to make informed recommendations on ordinance changes. And I would personally like to volunteer my time to assist in this effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leon. Robert Connery. Robert, if you could raise your hand.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. Name and address, Rob.
Okay, it's Rob Connery, number 9 Renfrew Park. And I guess I have a different opinion. It's probably one you've heard a lot of, so I'm not going to go into great detail. But I will tell you that I had a rental house next to me for many, many years, never registered, advertised on Airbnb for way more than the ordinance allowed. Every weekend there was a different crew in there. For many, many years, my family suffered. We called police. We worked with the zoning office. I wrote letters to the council, to Chief Passer and to Mr. Kane at the time, and essentially nothing happened for years. Okay, so I dealt with noise. I had catering trucks in front of my house. I had tents pitched. The owner never registered. He didn't answer his phone or text. He lived out of state. Finally, I worked with Steve Hotzel from the town. I don't think he still works for the town, but he helped me. We made him go to court. He didn't show up for court. They fined him. I don't know if he paid the fines or not, but finally he left. I don't know what caused him to leave, but he left, thank God. But for years, I was deprived of the ability to enjoy my home. And nobody did much. I have to tell you, I wrote a letter to the council, the police chief and Mr. Kane. I never even got a response. So, you know, all this talk of how great it is for the community doesn't resonate with me. I'm sorry. So 2 observations, you know, the police would come and they would do some things, but more often than not, they would say, well, I'm sorry, this is a zoning issue. It's not a police issue. Call zoning Monday. So I would have to suffer all weekend. So whoever you get to do this enforcement piece, it's got to be nights and weekends, because that's when the trouble is, okay? If you're just going to put somebody in there Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, that's not going to work. And I don't understand why the police can't enforce this, quite frankly. They're out in the community. They're there anyway. They're 24/7. I don't get that, but that's not for me to solve. Lastly, I would ask that the Economic Development Committee look at the whole short-term rental thing and look at it holistically. I understand the benefits, but when you have a high percentage of non-owner occupied homes, what is that doing to the culture of the neighborhood? It's taking residences off the market so that young people and elderly people maybe can't live here anymore. So, look at places like Venice, Italy, and other cities across the world that have gone to excessive levels.
Rob, I'm going to have to ask you to end it. Okay, you've gone over.
Yeah, I figured. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Okay, Lawrence. You put your hand up, Lawrence, so I can move you.
Lawrence Frank, 8 O'Donnell Road, Middletown. The hollowing out of the social and economic core of Middletown will continue as long as short-term rentals are allowed to operate. The problem is not enforcement, which by all accounts is a failure. The problem is not that short-term rentals only pay residential property tax rate, not commercial tax rates. These are solvable issues, but they do not go to the heart of the problem. The problem with short-term rentals is short-term rentals themselves. Short-term rentals are giant sandboxes for out-of-town visitors to play while they are here, leaving Middletown to clean up the messes left behind. Off-season closings of businesses, layoffs of employees, reduced tax revenues for the town and state, smaller and smaller school enrollment all contribute to the shredding of the social fabric of a once vibrant community, all in the service of so-called real estate investors. Recently, a house at 499 Walcott on Easton's Point sold, offered for sale at $725,000. It sold for $800,000. At the request of the new owners, contractors were asked to address the issues needed to repair. One contractor estimated over $150,000 in repairs. The buyer was listed as Coyote LLC, located in Boston. Coyote LLC stated their purpose was to buy, sell, and manage real property and all activities there too. There was one name listed on the LLC document, a lawyer at the firm Sarah Reagan and Fair. Just around the corner from 499 Walcott is a residence at 5 Stimson Street. It has a listed rent of $1,000 a night. Is there any doubt how 499 Walcott will be used? 5 Simpson is owned by a New York State resident. Just for reference, the police went to this address 10 times in the years 2019 and 2020. The owner was called into municipal court twice, fined $293, and it has another matter pending. Does that make up for the disruption to the neighbors from his behavior? So now we have another short-term rental at 499 Walcott. One less year for a family to support local stores and restaurants, one less year of state income tax receipts, one more year of fewer children in our schools, one more year of upward pressure on real estate prices and taxes, one more year of housing sucked up by real estate investors who take no responsibility to their chipping away at the foundation of our town. There is only one solution. With the exception of short-term rentals of owner-occupied properties where the owner is present during the rental, all short-term rentals in Middletown should be prohibited. Thank you.
Thank you. Nicole Shilen. Nicole, if you could raise your hand.
Hi there, can you hear me?
We can. Name and address, Nicole.
Noelle Shyland at 174 Center Avenue. I'm assuming, thank you for letting me speak tonight. I'm calling in reference to the Easton's Point Association. Did you get the memo that was sent in by them?
We did. I did.
Okay, so that's, so I'm just gonna read that memo from the Easton's Point Association. The Easton Point Association is an organization committed to maintaining the quality of life of the people who live at Easton's Point. We represent over 100 homeowners, many of which own short-term rentals. Short-term rentals contribute to a lot to the area. For example, our home values and taxes collected to the town. They direct families to the local beaches, restaurants, wineries, shops, fishing trips, sunset cruises, tours, and therefore add to the local economy. As an organization, we would like to express our desire for strong enforcement of the existing ordinance in the short-term rental area, rather than wholesale rewriting of them. Although we are open to some changes, the frustration of the residents in our area is apparent from the number of people speaking at town council meetings and sending emails to us. We would like to stand up for the residents out of our town that live in the Easton's Point area and ask that the existing short-term rentals ordinance are enforced by the police and by the zoning officers of the town, including noise, parking issues, and we believe the focus should be on those that are causing the problem and cracking down, not penalizing those that are respectfully running their business. So with that, we have 9 different things that we would like to have represented. The enforcement, the current state minimum fine of no less than $1,000 and making it a mandatory fine is a good start for the revised ordinance. We also believe that the owner and the tenant, if both are convicted, should each have to pay the mandatory fine. However, we believe that the owner should not be the charge until multiple offenses have occurred. We also suggest that the town consider finding the current unregistered short-term rental operators and get them registered. If they do not register within 30 days of the official town notification, they will be prohibited from getting a short-term rental authorization registration and will be subject to fines accordingly. We believe that the $500 per bedroom fee to pay for the short-term rental zoning enforcement officer is an exorbitant raise in fee, especially since it has been shown that only 25% of the complaints originate from short-term rentals. We recommend that the increase to $75 per bedroom and limit the owner occupied fee to 75. We recommend to hire an intern to manage and identify the 25% or so problem party houses, and suggest that a team made up of police officers, zoning enforcement officers respond to all short-term rental disturbances calls. We would like to see the ordinance changed to limit the number of people per bedroom in a short-term rental to 2 people.
Noel, your time is
Yes.
up.
All right, well, there was 3 more after that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Noel. Thank you for understanding. We have a lot of people tonight. Okay, Ed Dugolensky. Ed, if you're there, could you raise your hand, please? Hi, Ed.
Can you hear me?
We can. Name and address, Ed.
Ed Dugolensky, 24 Briarwood Avenue, Middletown, Rhode Island. And first of all, I'd like to thank the council for giving me this opportunity. I think I really enjoy the tone of the meeting as we proceed down this process. I've had my property for almost 5 years now, both short-term rentals and long-term rentals. And I think there's a couple of things that I'd like to share with the council. I think is a responsibility not only of the owner, but also of the tenants that are there. I think it's a twofold responsibility, one from a owner responsibility, a tenant responsibility, and of course, when needed, the police. As I look at short-term rentals and long-term rentals, I live 2 hours away from Middletown. So it's really unreasonable for me to take action on the tenants. What I have is for every rental that I have, I review with the tenants the ordinance on noise and parking. And I also have what I say is an oversight by my neighbors. The neighbors are my eyes and ears. And I tell you, in the last 4 to 5 years, I've had calls from my neighbors saying that we have some issues. And before we call the police, I quickly get on the phone and talk to the tenants. And it's been very reasonable from that standpoint. And when I look at the data, I've not had one call for the police to enact on any issues at my residence. So I think the key thing here is, one, there's a joint responsibility to make sure tenants understand the requirements and enforce those requirements. And if not adhering to those issues, then of course, last resort is to call the police from that standpoint. I think what I'm hearing about overall data accuracy and understanding, I think it's important that I wholeheartedly support getting a task force together to understand the data and with reasonable understanding of the costs, provide a fee that's adequate across the board. I think in combination, I would like to see it across the board on both short-term rentals and long-term rentals. So from my standpoint, I think first time caller, I appreciate the tone and what I'm hearing from the council. And thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Okay, Deborah Fagola. Deb, if you're there, if you raise your hand.
Sorry about that. My name's Deborah Fragola, 639 East Main Road. And I too like the tone of council. And most of my points have already been addressed. So in the interest of time, I think I'll pass.
Thank you,
You
Deb.
all have received my letter and I thank you for reading it.
Thank you, Deb. Okay, Todd Polando. Todd, if you're there, raise your hand. Thanks, Todd.
All right. That's one of the many reasons I love Middletown.
Todd, I need to hear your name and address. You were muted there at the beginning. Go ahead.
Okay. Todd Polando, 146 Center Ave.
Okay.
So I've had a short-term rental for 7 years. I've paid all the fees. I've paid the hotel taxes, everything that's been added. I post all the rules that the town has come up with. Actually, I live in Massachusetts, but I have a manager within the 10-mile radius requirement, and I've had 0 complaints and 0 issues with the police. So, as a lot of other people have stated, to hear us being penalized for something that we're not really causing is an issue. And I think a lot of people have really conveyed that very eloquently. I'd like to really point out Tom Welsh's information that he passed, because there's a lot of data there that shows that the short-term rental isn't the majority of the problem. So I think, we keep talking about, we got to do something, the sky's falling. With Tom's data, and obviously another gentleman presented some other data that also shows there's more renters out there. I think, that really needs to be looked into, and a solid number needs to be really figured out before anything really moves forward. The gentleman who had the problem with the neighbor, I think we can all agree that was the town's failure on basically taking care of the problem between the police or town council, whoever is responsible for helping that citizen. I don't want anybody making noise next to me, wherever I am, and we shouldn't have to put up with that. My renters have very strict rules, and they have your rules posted for the town. If they violate those, they will be thrown out without a refund. So I think that's why we've had great luck, because we really put it out there that the town has these rules, and then they're not going to put up with any variance to that. The 1% sales tax, it was very shocking to me to find out in this meeting that goes towards a general fund versus, helping the town with issues that supposedly are caused by short-term rentals. So I would like that, at some point to be addressed. I think Tom made a very good point with that. And, when I started, the fee per room was like $7. And then somehow it went up to 55, and now we're talking about 500. So I think my opinion is, I don't think we need any increase. I think we work with what we have, and Strom helping out with getting those people that aren't even registered, because there are a lot of them out there. I think that would make a big difference. But thank you for this forum and for listening to the people. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Todd. AJ Bucci, AJ. If you could raise your hand, AJ, thank you.
AJ Bucci, 80 Peckham Lane, member of Strom. Good evening, Mr. President, town councilors, and town administrator. Thank you all for your dedication to this matter and not rushing to judgment. I appreciate all of you maintaining an open mind as you process the copious amounts of information and ideas presented over the last month and beyond. And I am also thankful for the countless hours of service you provide to our community. My question relates to the staffing and duties of the building zoning department. In 2018, I began operating my short-term rental. It has been my experience the building zoning department was responsible for short-term rental inspection and regulation, while registration was the responsibility of the clerk's office. During the past 3 years, I knew the building zoning department had a total of 4 town employees. During the 3 years, for short-term rental matters, I engaged with Peter Medeiros and Celeste Logathetz. And in May 2018, I learned an ex-colleague of mine, Steve Holtzel, was employed as a zoning enforcement officer. It was my understanding some portion of Steve's duties were to investigate and enforce short-term rental violations with assistance of the police department. In the past year, I learned all 4 town employees retired or left their job, Jack Kane being the 4th town employee, which I did not mention. I was informed Chris Costa is now the building inspector, but I could not account for the other 3 town positions being filled. Regarding the 3 perceived vacancies, what are the status of the positions? Is the town filling the positions? How many of the positions will be filled? What are the responsibilities of the positions? Do the town leaders plan on separating building and zoning into 2 different departments? And lastly, because the town had a short-term rental enforcement officer in the recent past, Is the money budgeted for that position still available? And if so, can it be put towards a short-term rental compliance officer position should it be approved? I respectfully request the town council create a short-term rental task force that includes short-term rental operators and owners in order to provide solutions that better our community. Thank you for providing this opportunity to discuss this matter, and I look forward to having my questions answered.
Thank you, AJ. Brian Murray, Brian, if you could raise your hand.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
You can name and address, Brian, please.
Oh, yeah. Brian Murray, 103 Purgatory Road. And I'd just like to give you a little bit of a different face of the short-term renter. Even though I'm, from Massachusetts, I'm not an investor, and we don't look to earn money on the rental from our property. In fact, my family has been affiliated and had property in the community since 1944. I grew up there. My 3 kids grew up there. My wife is a proud graduate of Middletown High School, class of 1978. We spend all of our major holidays there, and pretty soon we're going to be living there full time. We started the short-term rental about 5 to 6 years ago, and quite frankly, it was really to pay the real estate taxes. And that's really all it was. So as I look at the proposal that was submitted, I would just stress the council to urge caution in terms of raising the application fee too high, because if the desire is to lessen the rentals, I think that's only going to increase them, because you're going to be forced to rent more to cover that cost. We rent very minimally, and it's only to just cover the taxation cost. The other thing, as I saw in the proposal, the legislative findings and intent, I had question about the fact that it calls out the short-term rentals as having a disproportionate number of violations, and the memorandum that cited 210 calls. I looked at it and I found my name on there for 3 of those calls, and I can tell you what those are. My son, my daughter, and myself on 3 different occasions had trouble getting in with the alarm. It went off, the company called the police, and the police came, but it had nothing to do with short-term rentals in any way, shape, or form. So my point is, as your council looks forward to make decisions, you need accurate information to make the best decisions. And I'm not so sure that that particular bit of information is accurate. And I also know that everyone wants to eliminate the adverse conditions that have been expressed by some folks at this meeting already. I think the folks that you're getting here, the ones that do register, are the conscientious renters, landlords. We do screen our tenants, and we don't have these kinds of effects. But the best way to do this is really to identify and enforce. And when you identify the actual units that are out there, I think clearly there's more than 143 in the town that are renting. And if you can get them to register, now the town has an area to target potential abuses, and also a source of revenue to really bring in that enforcement official, however you want to shape that office. I think that's absolutely essential to watch over this market. One other thing I would like to stress.
Brian, I have to ask you to wrap this up. You went past the 3 minutes.
There's only one thing I just say, please consider the requirement to have the owner come there within an hour. I think that might be problematic. If you've got an event where there's emotions and alcohol, your police have been there.
Thank you, Brian.
I'm not sure
Brian,
that
I gotta
adds to
cut
the
you
public
off.
safety.
Thank you.
That's fine. Thank you.
Christine Geyer, Christine, if you could raise your hand.
Hi,
Hi, Christine. Name and address, please.
my name is Christine Geyer. I live at 216 Boulevard in Middletown. We have a log cabin behind our property. We have rented it for the past 3 years to 5 stars. And I like how you are segregating the owner property to the non-owner property and giving us the lesser fee, because we work really hard to keep that 5-star status. We've never had a complaint. And that's all I want to
Why
say.
should we be penalized for the people who don't follow the regulations? This is
Thank
Frank.
you, Christine.
And that's all we wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Michael Topa, Mike Topa. If you could raise your hand, Mike, they can move you.
Hello,
Name
can
and
you hear me?
address. Yes, name and address, please.
Michael Toppa, 71 Aquidneck Avenue. I'm a member of Strom. We've had our home there since, 70 years ago when my dad built the house. I'm also a longtime resident of Middletown. I graduated Middletown High. We've continued using the house as a summer place for our family. And as years went by, it became necessary to rent it out part of the time to help cover the expenses. We register, we keep up with all the rules and regulations. We've never had any complaints. We're not showing up on any of the complaints. And we want to keep the place, nice. We have cameras there from when we're not in the area, so we can monitor the place on the outside. We have other family members that live around us next, their properties adjoin ours, and we look after each other. I like very much the tone of the council and the good ideas that they're coming up with. And I think that with the assistance of Strom and any other organization that's willing to participate to make things work for everybody. I don't want to see the gentleman that had the problem with the next door neighbors. That's not right either, and that has to be addressed. As far as the money goes, I'm in agreement with some of the other people that I think there's already funds there through the 1% and also with our registration fees that we should see if that'll work first before we decide to, or you decide to increase them. I want to thank all of you on the council. You're doing a great job, and I appreciate all your effort to make things work for all of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Dustin Varnell, Dustin Varnell, if you can raise your hand, they can move you, Dustin.
Good evening, council. Can you guys hear me?
We can. Name and address, please, Dustin.
Dustin Varno, 54 Warren Ave, Middletown. I just want to say thank you very much for listening to what we've been saying over the past couple meetings. President Sylvia, I appreciate you kind of reflecting on some of the things that we've been finding as we work through this process. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was I'm a member of Strom. We've joined up together and we're trying to have a positive impact for the community here. And we put together some data, and we've realized that there's potential of up to like 440 short-term rentals. I don't know if that's exactly accurate, but we were able to pull some information together using Airbnb and VRBO. And when you're talking about the short-term rentals, as far as the finances are concerned, President or Vice President Rodriguez, you're doing the accounting using the numeric values of the current registered voters for the position. So I'd like to just kind of reflect on that and say, well, what is going to be the impact of getting these other unregistered properties, the ones that we really want to register or to not be there? What's the financial impact of that? And I really think that we should try to reflect that accounting method into our position that we're going to have. So please take that into account. And further, I'd like to just talk about the position itself. So over the past few meetings, I've attended every one, and I've been looking at these meetings for several years, kind of on YouTube and stuff, and I've kept tabs with the town. What I see as the message is we need to get the information and the data of the unregistered properties and also the properties that are a nuisance to the police. Now, when the police chief came and spoke on, I think it was February 12th or whenever the last meeting was, he essentially sounded like he had his hands tied, right? We talked about, there was a story before, we've had a couple, I think 3 total properties that we said in the past couple of meetings that are nuisances. And each one, the police were called several times. And the police chief was saying he was standing on the outside of the property trying to use like an earphone device to see if it was above the amount of noise, 80 decibels or whatever it is. So I would put that back on the council and say, can we come up with a process that basically allows us to, without adding money to it, but essentially just allows the police to do their job and enforce the existing regulations or regulations that maybe we need. Because there's people on the property, these are unregistered properties. I think this is a communication farther than just adding another position. I also would like to say that I too would volunteer my time. I've been doing this for about 12 years. I live just a couple houses down from my rental property, which I bought in the downturn. And I believe I have input along with some of the other members of Strong that we can help get that data in. So please think about that. I would also like to just say that through these meetings, there was a gentleman that spoke a little while ago saying that short-term rentals are hollowing out the community. I fully disagree with that. We've heard a few people now saying that how this has empowered them to kind of keep their property in a place that's has increasing values and increasing taxes, which we are not in control of as Middletown residents. I myself have a young child, 2 young children.
Dustin, I have to ask you to wrap it up. You went over.
Yes, sir. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for calling in. Edward McPherson, Ed, if you can raise your hand, we'll move you over.
Hello, council. Can you hear me?
We can. Name and address, Ed.
Edward McPherson, 93 Maple Ave. And it's a 2-family, and so I'm an owner and an operator here at the location. I want to thank you guys for taking this topic on and for creating a forum for a conversation. I'm really glad to hear that, or to not have heard tonight, about the 60-minute owner sort of showing up and being available piece of the proposed ordinance. That was confusing to me because I just wasn't sure what I would do. I mean, I live here, and but I'm even thinking about another owner that maybe is in town somewhere. I think the issuing of the citation seems like the obvious answer on the enforcement piece. And then I believe that the local police do a follow-up call like the next day to let the owner know, if they weren't there, that they came out and issued a citation. So I'm glad to hear that it seems like it might be off the table. I think that's a great step forward. And I would just reiterate, I think that enforcement is key. And I really do think that the current regulations would solve a lot of these issues if the enforcement was there. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about the new chief's plans. I'd heard through the grapevine that there might be a couple additional deputies coming on with, some of this in their purview. And then I'd heard about turnover in the zoning office. So it'd be exciting to hear a little bit about the plans there and whether enforcement might be a part of that mix. I'm fully supportive of the task force idea, and I also would be willing to volunteer my time if I was the right person to serve there, because I think it's just that important of an issue. So thank you guys for your thoughtfulness around this, and I appreciate the forum and the venue.
Thanks, Ed. Sue Gleason. Sue, if you could raise your hand, we'll move you over. Sue Gleason.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, name and address, Sue, please.
Sue Gleason, owner of 36 Briarwood Avenue. Most of my concerns have been addressed, so I really appreciate this. And I reiterate that I appreciate the tone of this meeting and thank you for this time. My question or my comment was going to be really regarding the excessiveness of the registration fee proposals, because for me, this would force me to pass through these fees to my potential visitors. And in essence, my concern would be pricing myself and other and other folks probably have the same concern in pricing ourselves out of the market and having potential visitors selecting another vacation destination because we're just getting too high in price. So I appreciate that. I don't think it's a moot point, but I think it's one that's being given careful consideration. So I will say good night and thank you for your attention in this matter. I am a member of STROM, and I totally think it would be in all of our interests to create a task force comprised of council members and STROM and interested parties to come to some resolution because this is a beautiful town. We all have the best interests at heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. John Bagwell. John, if you can raise your hand, I'll move you over.
Can you hear me now?
Name and address, John.
John Bagwell, 587 Tuckerman Avenue, Middletown. First of all, I appreciate the amount of time that the council is spending on focusing on the issue to try to come up with what it's comfortable with as the right way to address problems that I think are not only those expressed by people who are successful STR owners, but those few people over the past few weeks who have explained some of the problems that they've had. I sent you the council a letter today with a perspective of basically a new perspective. And that's hinted at, I think, by Lawrence Frank. That's basically the impact that short-term rentals are having on property values. First of all, an STR investor may base their purchase price on a calculation that produces a greater value than that determined by one purchasing the property at their home. And Lawrence Frank gave that illustration of 499 Walcott. My proposal is this, that you advise the assessor to remove short-term rental sales from the comps, establishing assessed values for other residential properties. Otherwise, the neighbors of that one at 499, basically on just the traditional approach to comps, will find that their values are increasing. Secondly, an STR could have, and I don't say necessarily will have, but could have a negative impact on the quality of life of adjacent properties. I spoke to one of the members of the administration once, and I said, this could cause your assessment to increase because of what they pay. And this person responded by saying, if an STR opened up next to me, I would go to the assessor and ask for a reduction in my value. And I think, frankly, whereas probably most STRs are well managed, there's always the uncertainty that may not happen. And I think that that's something that the assessor could take into account. And third, this is probably the most controversial, and that is a prospective buyer should have a right to be fully informed about features that could impact a property. So I propose that a town would require a seller to notify prospective buyers of registered short-term rentals located within a specified distance, for example, adjacent to it. There's a property nearby us on Tuckerman Avenue, a fine home. It's on the market, and located right next to it is a short-term rental. 75% of the time, the people appear to be great neighbors. Probably 10 to 20% of the time, it's a problem. And I think—
John, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap it up. You went over your time.
I'm all through. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dave Rushlow. Dave, if you can raise your hand, we'll move you over.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now, Dave. Name and address, please.
Okay. Good evening, Town Council. I am David Rushlow, 32 Ellery Avenue. I am an on-site landlord. I have 3 units, been here for about 20 years. I cannot help but think that we are discussing here tonight is almost exactly word for word what I was addressing with the council in June 2016. The owners of these problem houses in the town are like parents that do not discipline their children. So the child figures that they can do whatever they want and there are no consequences for their bad behaviors. I think we are on the right track, but going from 0 to 100 in such a short time with added taxes and hiring a zone enforcement officer is not the correct path to take. We should all take a deep breath and concentrate on a solution that will make the ordinances effective and economically feasible for our town. 3 ideas I have, for instance, there should be a copy of the ordinance printed with the laws regarding noise, parking, trash, and occupancy terms, and the fines that will be administered accordingly. The owners, when sending out their rental contracts to be read and signed by incoming tenant, should also have a copy of the ordinances attached and required their signature. When the owner receives the said contract back, he should also sign the form and it should be displayed in the rental unit along with the contract accordingly, therefore eliminating that I was not aware of the ordinances of the town. Police present a strong presence and they have been trained to handle diverse situations. That's why I believe that they should be the proper enforcers of the ordinance. They should be supplied with mobile decimal meters, which range from $2,000 to $4,000. If the officer at the house violating, the one who's violating it, any of the ordinances, and he receives a call for another pressing incident, he excuses himself and answers the other call. I want to commend all the officers that I've had contact with the times I have called and thank you for what they do. They've done a total professional job and I can't thank them enough and I wish them to all be safe. Thirdly, if the renter receives 3 violations in 1 season, they should be banned for the next year. Bottom line is the enforcement and I feel that hiring a zoning officer and all the extras for almost $190,000, which was calculated at approximately $147,000, is not warranted at this time. Let's slow down and take a year, as Council Member Tom Walsh has suggested, that what we do is we compile accurate records for these short-term rentals, then address the situation. We have all the tools available to us now. All we have to do is enforce the ordinance. If I have a few minutes, I would like to read excerpts from article in the Newport Daily News on June 9th, 2016. Both these articles, one was from Councilman Paul Rodriguez and the other from President Robert Sylvia.
Dave, your time is up.
Okay.
Thank
All
you,
I wanted to do is, just so we know, the things I was going to read was to commend what both
Dave, your time is up.
you people
Thank you.
did for me at that time, and I want to thank you for it.
Yep. Thank you, David. Okay, Beth Rushlow. Beth.
Good evening, Town Council. I'm Beth Rushlow, 32 Ellery Avenue, Middletown, Rhode Island. I agree with the council member Thomas Welsh. He had a lot of great points in his presentation. I think we need to slow this down. I think a great way to handle this would be to get a year's documentation with all accurate accounts for violations with short-term rentals, for noise, parking, trash, etc. Keep the 1% tax collected from these short-term rentals in its own account. Then after the year, the numbers can be evaluated and we can all come to a fair decision of fees and ordinances for the short-term rentals. There are a lot of responsible owners of short-term rentals and they should not be penalized for the party houses. I thank you for letting me speak tonight.
Thank you, Beth. Camille Marcello. Camille, if you could raise your hand, we'll move you over. Camille.
Oh, got it. Can you hear me now?
You can. Name and address, please.
Camille Marcello, 30 Warren Avenue. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the tone and the direction of the, which way we're going with the short-term rentals. And basically you're hitting all the points that I think need to be addressed. And I'd like some input at any time. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Camille.
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. I do have one other question. Sorry about that. I found out that I am on the list. My house is on the list of violations, and I had no idea about it. How do I go about finding out? I mean, it might have, I don't know when it's even from.
You'll have to make an inquiry with the police department, probably.
Oh, all right. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Camille. Olga Tragessa. Olga?
Hi,
Hello, Olga. Name and address, please.
Olga Tragesser, 71 Aquidneck, and I'm a member of STROM. And I too am really very, very happy with the tone. I feel as though that we're just being informed now, and the council is I think going in the right direction in terms of deciphering all of the information. I've learned a whole lot through this. I had 3 or 4 questions that I was going to ask. I think they're just like, I'll just throw this out there. The talk about changing the age from 12 to 3. Has there been any more conversation about that?
No.
Okay. So, all right. You know what? They're the things that I want to address. I don't think is the time tonight to do it. So I appreciate you letting me speak, and I do appreciate everything you guys do.
Thanks, Olga.
Yep.
Okay, Bob Walker. Bob, if you're there, if you raise your hand, I'll move you over.
Robert Walker, 11 Porter Road. I only have one real property and I'm about 10 minutes away from it, and hopefully I have not been a part of the problem. I have neighbors that keep me informed, and I can be there in about 10 minutes or so. I want to thank the council for not only the time, but the quality of all the discussions that I've heard so far. Most of my points have been covered. I do have a couple of thoughts. I would like to see the registration fees kept about where they are. I think the solution might be in finding some of those 200 or 300 that aren't registered. And I would just suggest that, maybe somebody's already done it, but you could go on any day of the week, go on VRBO, HomeAway, Airbnb, and I'm sure there's probably 10 others that I don't even know about, and see how many of these properties are actually registered. Second thought would be, if we do need more revenue, which could be the case, I guess, depending on what the solution finally is, I would much rather see the 1% tax raised, because it bears some relationship to the revenue that one is receiving. I think the most I've ever made is just maybe over a little over $10,000 in a whole summer. And to get hit with a $1,000 registration fee would just kill us. We have 2 bedrooms. I think that's about it. Thank you again for a good job.
Thank you, Rob. Amy Phelps. Amy? If you're there, Amy, raise your hand, please, so I can pull you over. Amy, are you there?
Karen cannot see her, Bob. She's not there.
Okay, we'll skip her. Okay, Tricia Onofrio. Tricia?
Hello,
Name and address, Trish.
Trisha Onofre, owner at 23 Warren Avenue. Just want to say thank you again to the town council for the tone, for all your reading your emails and listening and researching. I really appreciate it. Have been landlords in Middletown for 25 years, both long-term and short-term. We get it. We've seen the changes. We know it's a struggle. We understand cities and, all over the world is struggling with this. I'm a member of Strong. We do support the creation of a task force just to gather data and make sure that any recommendations and changes are data driven and are thoughtful recommendations that involve all of the community. The one question I do have is the $300 flat fee you talked about. Would that be $300 per unit, per property, per owner?
Again, Trish, that was just my initial suggestion.
Okay.
Nothing's been voted on, but it would be a flat fee for owners that did not reside on the property.
Okay.
An annual, just a flat fee. No more calculations by room, nothing, just a flat fee.
So if there was 3 units on one property.
300. That'd be
okay.
it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
If that ends up being considered
Right.
by the council.
That's what you're proposing.
Those are my thoughts on today.
Okay, thank you. And just so you know, my husband, Paul Onofrio, is listed, but he won't be speaking. He was just in case I couldn't speak, he was going to step in because I had
All
some
right.
work stuff. So you can cross that person off the list. You're down to 39.
You did very well on behalf of both of you, Trish. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Trish. Chuck Bodeman. Chuck, if you can raise your hand, Chuck, we'll move you over. Chuck, are you there? You're muted, I believe.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can. Name and address, Chuck.
Chuck Bodeman, 19 White Terrace. My statement was with respect to memorandum C and E and the discrepancy on the number of registered and unregistered STRs. Leanna Emerant and Dustin Barnell, and actually Bob Rodriguez, I think you kind of covered this already. But I wanted to say a few more words on Air DNA. If you and the council and other STR owners have not looked at this website, I recommend taking a look. There's a lot of free material. The main premise of Air DNA is a marketing tool, and of course, they're making money. But it does show in the free area 440 STRs in Middletown. They get their data only from Airbnb and VRBO, so not from FlipKey and other advertising areas. Also, my 3 properties are not even in there. So I called them and asked them about that. And they said, you have to have rented within the last 3 months in order to actually even make their list. So I haven't rented with Airbnb and VRBO in the last 3 months. So I wasn't on the list. So likely, in my opinion, there's a lot more than 440 STRs out there. And I think we'll be finding that out, fairly soon. So I agree with the Strom document. I'm also a member of Strom and Tom Welch's proposal, and I would also happily volunteer for the task force. Bob, I also agree with your opening statement. I think your proposal of $75 for owner occupied and $300 to $350, I forget, for the non-owner occupied.
300.
Reasonable short-term compromise until the task force can provide better data. Thanks.
Thank you, Chuck. Okay, Anne Marie Hogan. Anne Marie? If you're there, if you raise your hand, Anne Marie.
She's not there, Karen.
Okay, thank you. Julie O'Halloran. Julie?
Hello.
The name and address, Julie.
Hi, it's Julie O'Halloran. I live at 22 Esplanade. Thank you, Mr. President and members of the council, for this opportunity to speak tonight and for mentioning my husband, Kevin, at your first meeting. I really appreciate that. He really loved this town. I also appreciate that you are all working so hard to reasonably solve this issue. I do have a concern about the accuracy of the Memorandum B spreadsheet. It shows 7 calls for service to my home at 22 Esplanade. I have confirmed with the police record department that all the calls were made by me for emergency medical services for my family or personal property protection and had nothing to do with the short-term rental of my home. We need to remove the misleading calls for service from the equation and have clarification on these calls. Only legitimate calls for noise, parking, or trash should be considered as violations, and the caller should be identified. We need to enforce the existing short-term rental ordinance and document violations, and perhaps have a registration for long-term rentals too, possibly a lower price point. If the town is going to use this data to justify the registration fees and hiring of a dedicated zoning officer, then these stats need to be accurate and demonstrate that calls are due to short-term rentals and not property owners or long-term rentals. I am a member of STROM and would like to see a revised Memorandum B with corrections for my calls and all the other quote unquote other category type calls. In addition, I'd like to suggest a fire pit ban or curfew for fire pit usage of 10 p.m. to reduce late night noise. I have noticed that my neighbors, both full-time owners that live there and short-term rental owners with fire pits, are outside year-round after 10 p.m. with escalating noise, sometimes into the early morning hours. Fire pits are also a hazard, so a ban of some kind should be addressed. I want to be part of the solution, and I'm available to help in any way. I think a task force should be created to study the short-term rental situation and address enforcement to solve the problems. Thank you for your time and efforts to work to get this solved. I really appreciate it. Good night.
Thank you, Julie.
Thanks, Julie.
Michael Cunningham, if you could raise your hand.
Michael Cunningham's not there. Karen says he's not there, Bob.
Thank you, Vice President. Sarah Minor, Sarah?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can. Name and address, sir.
Sarah Minor, 7 Cogshell Circle. Good evening, Mr. President and Town Council members. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. I am a member of STROM. I would like to address what feels like a bit of a misconception on the finances of a typical STR property. So this is some educational information, I hope, for many. In the past couple council meetings, there have been several comments about how the $1,000 fines would be just a drop in the bucket for a big STR, and that the 500 a bedroom would hardly make a ripple on the balance sheet. The perception seems to be that STR owners are making the big bucks, to coin a phrase that was used recently by a council member. My goal in the next 2 minutes is to dispel that belief. I am now going to outline a typical large STR balance sheet. This is not a real house, but a compilation and averaging of data from the core members of STROM. Imagine a fictitious 5-bedroom STR that charges $1,000 a night for peak summer weekends. Over a 12-week period, that home could gross revenue at $36,000. Assuming they actually booked at the advertised rate, assuming that all weekends were booked. Neither of those is an actual reality for an STR owner. For the rest of the bookable year, May, June, and September, pricing is more likely half of the $1,000 a night. With 14 weekends, around $2,000 a piece, that would gross the owner another $28,000. So in this example, this STR would gross $64,000 before expenses. After expenses, including real estate taxes, hotel and state taxes, mortgages, cleaning, laundry, utilities, booking fees to Airbnb, repairs, upkeep, and property management fees. And that list doesn't even put a value on the substantial time investment involved for the owner to effectively manage the property. A fairly typical return on this would be 9 to 10% profit, which is $6,000 total for the whole year. So in that context, imagine how the owner might feel about the possible ordinance changes. How does he or she feel about $2,500, 40% of the bottom line annual profit coming out for a possible fee? Or what happens if a tenant breaches the contract and a $1,000 fee is implemented? Another 17% hit to the profit bottom line. Trust me, there wouldn't be much left. So this is a positive example where the STR is charging $1,000 a night. There are many owners who are retired, and we've heard from a few of those. This could be their only source of income. It might be the only way they can even keep their house.
Excuse me, but I have to ask you to wrap it up. You went over your time.
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity,
Thank
and
you,
I
Sarah.
support the task force.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Kathleen Cornell. Kathleen.
She was there, Bob. We just need to ask her to raise her hand again, please.
Kathleen, if you're there, raise your hand. There you go. If you could unmute yourself, Kathleen.
Okay.
Name and address, please.
15 Satchwest Drive on my way to 11 Shore Drive. A resident in transit. Thank you, Mr. President and members of the council, and thank you for your incredible patience and also for the outstanding quality of work you've put into this question. And your attorney advisor and Mr. Brown, all the rest of them, it's really a remarkable achievement and much appreciated. When I said moving to 11 Shore Drive, that is what I intend to do in the near future. This is a property that's been in our family for just about 100 years, and we have been renting it for 50 years. Quick consideration, when we started renting, we would rent for the whole summer. And then as the pace of life picked up and prices went up, people could only afford to rent a month at a time. And then it went to a week at a time. And now we have the short-term rentals, which are often only a couple of days. And that's what people are able to do. And they are so grateful to be able to get away from whatever's going on in their lives and get over by the ocean and relax. We love the tenants we work with, and we love what we are doing here. So we appreciate your consideration of this as you look for where we're going on this. I think that there's a couple of questions that are out there that might and will be clarified during the meetings that are coming up. And that's the purpose of the actions that are being considered, which I think by and large are reasonable. But the question is, are they punitive? Are we going to punish the bad actors? Are they revenue raisers? Are we trying to raise revenue for the town because we need to? Just exactly what it is we are attempting to accomplish with the actions that may be taken from this, I think is something to be explored in the meetings that are coming up. So once again, I know it's been a very long evening, but I would refer to the previous speaker who broke down for you the realities of the short-term rentals. They are not gold mines. They are workable businesses as long as they're not put out of business. And so I think none of us want to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs, and that can happen very quickly if you're not watching. So thank you for your consideration. I look forward to seeing how this works going forward and have another opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you, Kathy.
Ryan Miller. Ryan, if you're there, Ryan, please raise your hand.
Hi, Ryan Miller, 13 Fairview Ave. I just
evening.
want to start off by saying I agree with the focus on enforcement throughout this call. I think we need to have accurate data before we make decisions to change current ordinances. I think Tom Welch has a great few points, pointing out especially where the money from these fees to register short-term rentals go and how we can redirect it to help support the overall enforcement of the current ordinances. I'd also like to say that hosts provide a valuable and positive impact to the community by bringing in, by supporting them, supporting our local businesses, and especially a positive impact to our guests, a totally different experience than staying in a larger hotel. Overall, I'd like to say that I support the idea of the task force that's been brought up here a number of times, that they need to gather and interpret the accurate short-term data or short-term rental data from the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Lance Minor. Lance, if you could raise your hand, please. Lance Minor.
He's not there. Karen said he's not there.
Okay. Rick Medeiros. Rick. Rick, name and address, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Name and address, Rick.
All right, Rick Medeiros, 52 Tuckerman Avenue, a member of Strom, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak here. I'm only going to make 2 points in the interest of time. The first in regards to Memorandum F. Other post-employment retirement benefits is said to be currently receiving roughly $55,000. I also heard the term fair share being repeated a few times back on the 16th of February. I'd like to point out what Councilman Welch already alluded to this evening. That was our fair share, and you decided to invest it elsewhere. So for that reason, I will not support any hike in any fee. The second point, a quick one regarding the 2019-2020 calls for service. And while I don't want to belabor that point, I would like to highlight how small the issue is in the grand scheme of things. And I say this with all sympathy in the world for people like Mr. Redfern and Mr. Doyle, who deserve an enforcement-based solution to their problem. But the two numbers I want to share with you today are 7 and 8. 7 is the number of actual fines paid out by guilty parties, already stated today. The second number, 15, is the number of documented summertime rental season calls for service in regards to noise from the 2019-2020 lot sheet. Consider that number 15 when we know there could very well be 1,200 to 2,000 individual short-term agreements between all registered renters during the summer season. This just highlights how tiny the issue is in comparison to other issues that we could be talking about today. In short, I ask, does this warrant a part-time position? I'd argue no. But with that said, I'd like to answer VP Paul Rodriguez's question to Councilman Welch from earlier this evening. I quote, should it come from non-residents or residents? I offer up option C, get the money you want from unregistered people. If you truly believe you need $55,000 or some figure around there, I strongly urge that the chief of police and the chief of police's recruits rather be considered as a reasonable solution, as well as going after the unregistered. In closing, President Sylvia, if you want ideas or insist that a line must be drawn in the sand, your best bet is to not do it today, but rather involve a handful of strong members. Give them a seat at the table, and we'd be more than happy to solve the small number of problems we have. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Rick.
you. Lance Minor. Lance, I understand he's here now. Lance.
Yes. Hi, this is Lance Minor. Sorry. 7 Cogshell Circle.
Go ahead, Lance.
President, Town Council members, thank you very much for allowing me to speak tonight. I just want to reiterate what Vice President Rodriguez had mentioned earlier and Julia O'Halloran, specifically regarding Memorandum B. On the other column, that's something to really take a look at, because I saw on 2 of my properties, there were 2 calls during that time frame, 2019 to 2020. And they were from me. I was actually calling about the coyote. We had a coyote problem. If you recall, it was in the news and papers, and no one could find this coyote. And I think we even had some animal expert trying to capture them. Well, I saw the coyote trotting down the street, and then it was in my backyard. So I called, and that's why other was mentioned. Anyways, I want to thank you for all your time and effort into trying to solve the problem of short-term rentals and also address the benefits as well. Thank you very much for your time.
Excellent.
Thanks, Lance.
Jason Rustin. Jason.
Hi, Jason Rushton, 23 King Road.
Hi, Jason.
Hey, how are you? So some of the numbers that I was looking at also for the service calls seems to be kind of inaccurate with the numbers that we're working with. There's so many other. I was in the same category where I had called animal control and it's under other for the last 2 years. Never had any problems with any renters. I also live in the home, which I think is a big difference, where we are not considered owner occupied, but we only rent it out for a little while we're out in the summer. We're both teachers here in town. So I go back to look at, I think we should have accurate numbers to determine if it's an actual problem. And looking at the numbers here, it seems that compared to the rest of town, the short-term rentals are not to be part of the biggest issue. I do like that you have talked about being a part-time officer or enforcement for this, because it is a very small season here that people actually do rentals. So I do appreciate that you guys are looking into it. The $55,000 that is coming in as a 1% kind of short-term rental fee, that was, it looks like it's taken as a Band-Aid to kind of put over a funding issue for the pensions, where it's really taking it from this. This is what it should be used for. This 55,000 should be used for the enforcement. This is where you add the $55 a room fee plus this, the 55,000, and that really funds your part-time person to enforce this. The other thing being, this is my family home. I'm very careful of who I rent to. I only want a family in here. I don't want more than 5 people. And so that's where it really leads to not having any issues at my property. I think that's one of the biggest things when you look at it is I care for my property. I don't want it destroyed. I don't want my neighbors to, bothered. And this is where it really comes down to the host itself, kind of pre-screening and knowing who's coming into your property. Thank you so much for your time. I just wanted to kind of put that out there for you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Jason.
Jay Redfern. Jay.
Good afternoon or good evening, councilors. James Redfern, 275 Green End Ave. I guess I'm in the minority here today because, quite honestly, I'm stunned at what I'm hearing. I spoke with you guys a couple weeks ago. I detailed the misery of my existence in my home at 275 Green End Avenue. And there was sympathy and agreement that I'm living with a nuisance, and it seems like that is gone. I met with Chief Cure, and he told me that there's absolutely no teeth to the ordinances, and now we're walking them back. I'm furthermore, quite honestly, disgusted by the fact that while most of the people who have been speaking tonight seem to be members of STROM, and it seems like they have a very active, heard political voice with the decisions that are made and the influence of the council, I offered at my last meeting to speak with each of you individually or collectively, as well as I sent emails to some of you and not one of you responded to me to gain additional information or to ask me about my situation or my problems. So to reiterate, the situation that I am dealing with, and I met with Chief Cure and he looked at me and said, I have the list of calls that you have made from 2000, I believe it was 7 to present. What happened 2.5 years ago? Did you give up? And I said, yes, I gave up calling the police. So this number here that everybody's referencing for 2019 and 20 calls for service is bogus, because I gave up, and I'm sure there are other folks as well, like Rob from Renfrew Park, who just stopped calling the police because there is no enforcement. I've not heard a single mention today of how any of these ordinances are going to be enforced to solve the issue that I am facing. And quite honestly, the rental season starts in 2 months, and I have zero confidence that I'm going to get any sleep between Memorial Day and Columbus Day this year. And perhaps you, any one of you members of the town council, or quite honestly, anybody who's a member of Strom, give me your number. I'll give you a call at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday, and you can come by my house and see what I'm dealing with. And then maybe you'll understand why the people who live next to these houses, where quite honestly, we're abused by hotel situations in very large groups, feel like we're abused and neglected by the town. So I will reiterate, everybody on the Strom group has offered to be part of your task force. I would welcome any of you to call me and ask me to join that task force. At this point, I have zero confidence that that will ever happen, though, because I feel like as much as I offer solutions and try to explain the situation in a reasonable voice, I am not heard. And it's wrong. I am a taxpayer. I have been paying taxes on my home since 2006. And when people come in from New York or from, LLCs from Boston, they don't care about me. Not me as a person, me as a Middletown taxpayer who has to live next to a hotel.
Thank you, James.
No response.
I let you go over a little bit, James. I have to cut you off. Thank you. Debbie Amarant. Debbie.
Can you hear me?
Yes, name and address, Deb.
Hello?
Yes, name and address, Debbie.
Debbie Amaran, 60 Island Drive. I'd like to thank you, President Silva, and the Town Council for taking this time for this very important topic. I appreciate your consideration with working with the short-term rental owners. I am both a Middletown resident with a young family. I have kids in a Aquidneck school and Gaudet, and also a short-term rental owner. I just want to speak to the Memorandum B service calls. I, along with everyone else, also requested from the police department a list of service calls. And I found that there were 6 service calls to my property between January 2019 and present day. 5 of the 6 violations are verifiably not related to short-term activity. They were illegal dumping and various things that I had called myself. I was also not notified of any. There was one, but that they said was a noise violation. I was not notified on that, and I did not receive any citation. I guess the takeaway from all of this is that the number of service calls does not correlate to the short-term rental disturbances, and the data that was presented in Memorandum C is quite misleading. I also want you guys to know that I believe the creation of a short-term rental task force is long overdue, and we need to do that to address these issues moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb.
Thank you, Debbie.
Debbie Boardman. Debbie.
Hi, Debbie Boderman, 19 White Terrace.
Go
Can you
ahead.
hear me?
Thank you. I think a lot of the points and comments have already been made that I was going to ask questions about tonight. So I know your list is long. I don't want to take up any more of your time. I just want to say thank you for all your efforts from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb.
Debbie.
Dan Titus.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Council. I'll just take a couple seconds.
Name and address, Dan, please.
Daniel Titus, 383 Paradise Avenue. I welcome a task force on anything. Definitely help us get through this. But I want to be clear that I think rentals are a necessity for any space, especially Middletown. I am rental friendly. I even think short-term rentals have their place. However, I don't think that place is our neighborhoods. I purchased property in a residential area to raise children, so I wouldn't have to live next to a hotel. So I wouldn't have to live next to a boarding house or a gas station. I purposely chose it for this reason. And now we're being forced to live next to, maybe not noise complaints, as somebody said, but the fact that people are coming and going every single weekend. And that in and of itself is a nuisance, affects my peaceable enjoyment of my property. Why am I the person who has to report my neighbor? Like somebody said, my neighbors watch out for me. That's not my job. That's your job as a renter. People talk about how 3 of my properties or 2 of my properties. That's laughable. How about my one property that I live in year round? I think that people should be able to rent their houses if they live in their houses. If they are living there, I agree with Paul. I agree with you, Robert. That's their property. They live there. They can police it themselves. I have a problem and I have no sympathy when somebody tells me that they own 2 and 3 properties. They're using it as an investment, as a business. And I'm not against business. I'm against business in my neighborhood where I'm trying to raise a family. Even more alluring to me was the fact that I had Sarah tell me that on a bad year, she makes $6,000. She used names like income, profit, bottom line, balance sheet. I pay my oil. I don't have a income for that. I have what I pay in taxes, what I make. I've chosen Middletown to live because it was a peaceful place to live. And I bring a very unique view to this. I think you need to look at it. I have no problem with short-term rentals. They shouldn't be in our neighborhoods. Take a look at where all these calls are coming from. I looked up every single address these people talked about today while we were sitting here. I looked up where they were from, absentee landlords. All in the Point area of Middletown, most of them. Now, maybe Storm has a really good marketing arm because most of the people on here tonight are saying that little moniker, I'm with Storm. That's great. So you have really good marketing. But what about the people who have to live next to a transient residential area every day of their life? Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. Okay, Jim Thompson. Jim?
Jim Thompson, 1 Renfrew Park. And everybody's, thanks for this conversation. This has been great. And I think all the points that I would make have been covered. I did just want to underscore, though, having some kind of a task force that includes everybody, all the stakeholders, is really important. And I'd be more than happy to help with that in any way that I could. But the other thing I also want to point out is that the season is basically upon us, and most everyone, I'm guessing, on this call has already booked guests at the current under the current procedures. So we need to tweak it. We need to make changes. Completely understand that. But as we do that, we should just be aware that there are already guests who have been booked under the old rules. So in the old fees and everything. So just to keep that in mind as we move forward. That's it.
Thanks, James.
Thanks, James.
All right, colleagues, we have no other callers. We went through 42 people. So I'm going to put it back on the floor. Does anybody have any comments in regards to any potential considerations in regards to moving forward tonight? Councilor Welch? You're muted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, so to my earlier point, I thought AJ's point about zoning Steve, I'm sorry, his last name begins with an H. I'm not sure what it was, but if he was doing this type of work last year, there must be a spot in the budget for a portion of the new position we're asking for. I also have a question. I don't know if it can be answered. That I talked about the public safety interns with the chief. I don't know if that is a done deal. I don't know when it was decided on or if it was. But I would be curious to know if in fact that is going to happen, and whether or not, if it was prior to all this conversation, maybe there's already been a way to fund them. I don't know that answer. I think the last point of the season's already booked is a good one. I mean, everybody's already based, their business financial records on the fact that this was the fee structure. I'm sure, if you go to a great campground in the summer and you leave and try to book it again as soon as you leave, last year. So I bet all that the horse is already out of the barn. So I'm kind of liking the idea of staying put, getting better data, and then a group of people, however we have to make them up to make it be fair. I think is a good idea, and it really, I'm guilty. I did not call Mr. Redfern. I just don't understand, and the other one, Renfrew Park. I guess I got to sit down with the chief again. I don't understand how that's happening for so long, so blatantly. That really bothers me. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, would you care to address a couple of Councilman Welch's comments? I can't answer the comments in regards to these recruits. I can't answer that question, but perhaps you can.
Sure, that's a concept that the police chief was bringing forward in the upcoming budget. So it is not something that the council has considered yet. So that would be something that you would actually receive and begin to discuss as of after April 1st, when the budget's completed and submitted to the council for consideration. When I've met with the police chief, we've talked about, so I think in general, another question or concern that Mr. Welch brought up is that Steve Hutzel was doing this, so somehow the taxpayers were already paying for this service. And and this has been discussed also, is that we are fully saturated with work for the zoning officer. And I think through this process, what we've identified is that, this in fact is an area that isn't necessarily that everybody in the town should pay for, that it's a service that's attributable to a certain program, in this case, the short-term rental program. And I think to address zoning issues that affect everybody in town, we need to have an additional resource that just addresses the short-term rentals, which will allow the zoning officer to address issues across the entire community, which was the intent of the purpose. But again, as things have come up, we've had to redirect that resource elsewhere. So I think that answers two of the questions. Or
Yeah,
I think they do.
I appreciate that. Does that kind of help you out, Councilor Welch, the questions you had? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. It absolutely does. Thank you, Mr. Brown. And those were, just questions to get the answers out there. But I am fully behind the idea of those auxiliary cadets. I think it's a great idea. So Thank you.
Any other council like to make any comments tonight? Perhaps make any motions, perhaps any thoughts of where we proceed going forward? Vice President?
Thank you, Bob. So a few takeaways from the callers. And Tom, I'm guilty too with all the emails and everything. No excuse, but I didn't contact Mr. Redfern. Couple things. 1 hour response time was brought up several times. I think that's maybe something we need to consider. I'm not sure if it's realistic. The other one was in the form of several emails, and also brought up a couple of times tonight was the age from 12 to 3. Maybe that needs to stay at 12. And Julia O'Halloran, I thought she brought up a good point as well, is talked about fire pits. Not banning, she said either banning them or curfewing them. I mean, you can put all these things in place, but again, it's enforcement. You know, the more rules we put in place, the harder it is to enforce. So I thought it was a real good conversation. I think we all continue to learn a lot. I'm interested in this short-term rental task force. I'd like to see how that would be structured and what their role would be, working with the town. I'd like to know more about that. And I would, and again, I'm going to go back to, I know the numbers are being provided probably the best they can. I'm just not sure they're accurate. I think a lot of the residents were upset. If I was on the list, I'd be upset as well with the other column. I think we just need to, I didn't really pay a lot of attention to that anyway, because as I read it, there was just no description of what those calls were. So that's kind of the takeaway I had tonight. It's just really, again, comes down to enforcement. And, you know, do we want to proceed with a full-time person, which I'm not in favor of. I would certainly be in favor of a part-time person to start and to see where it goes. And I had to get up to use the bathroom, so I didn't hear if there was an answer to the zoning enforcement officer that left, if part of those monies, Sean, were dedicated to you know, the short-term rentals enforcement.
No, so that's a zoning enforcement officer that services the entire community. And I think Mr. Bucci had the question about whether or not we were actively recruiting someone for that position, and we have been since Celeste retired.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Welch.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I agree with what Paul just said about the age, and I forget the other one he picked apart. But so my big takeaway here is I really hope we don't motion to try to start an ordinance change, because I don't think we have enough data to decide. And I think we're still not clear. I did start out at the full-time officer, and I think I'm in line with during the season. I would like to see, as Mr. Brown had provided in the agenda, a breakdown of what it would cost. And I think that would help Paul's math, and we could all get on the same page of what we agree are our costs, and Mr. Brown can give us ideas of where the money can come from or what the actual shortfall is. So I agree. Great conversation. It was good to hear everybody speak. I think the joint task force there is a great idea. I think we're behind the 8 ball on the summer season already. I'm in favor of sitting tight, waiting for some numbers, asking some good questions before we move to try to make a decision. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Councilor Von Villas, any comments?
I was just thinking that I'm a person who likes organization, And I agree that doing anything wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, is a mistake. At the same time, I think we need to have a plan. So I'd like to see maybe from Mr. Brown and perhaps from you as well, some sort of timeline of how we would move forward. I mean, if we're just talking about talking and talking and talking, we've done that for a long time. And I don't want to continue to do that. At the same time, I don't want to jump in before we're ready. So I kind of think that perhaps setting a timeline of what should be done by this amount of time, we should have done this. Maybe the development of the task force. What would their duties be exactly, rather than just sitting? I hate committees. Committees to me are just a waste of time. But if you give them a role and ask them to do something specifically with a timeline, then you're liable to accomplish something. You're likely to accomplish something. So that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see a timeline. And if that means that the timeline is going to extend 6 months or at the end of the year, that's okay. If in fact we know what we're expecting to have happen. But just to talk about, oh, maybe we should do this or maybe we should do that, frankly, that just wears me out and I don't want to hear it.
I concur. I'm worn out. Councilor Welch.
So thank you, Mr. President. I'll get that right one of these times. To Mrs. Von Villas's point, I agree. I hate talking about the same thing every month at a committee meeting and never going anywhere. However, in this case, I think what we've seen is all the conversation has evolved and all the ideas have come out on the table, we are moving towards the answer. And I feels like we can agree that we're not quite there yet. I don't know how you put a timetable on it, but possibly by adding the meeting in to come back with, maybe we could say, in 2 weeks, write down the 5 top things that you think we need to consider. We go out, we get the answers in a time frame, and then we move ahead. So I think we're doing a good job. Time frame, I don't know how you put that on it. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Santos, any comments?
No, I have nothing to say at this time. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to just make a couple brief comments. It's apparent and obvious. We're not going to get to anywhere tonight with this. We've spent a lot of time on this so far, and rightfully so. This is something that evolved over years, and hopefully it'll start correcting itself. I think with the enhanced enforcement that I anticipate through the police department and consolidated with whether we end up hiring somebody or not hiring somebody later on down the road, but it doesn't appear to me, and frankly, we have a lot of things on our plate ahead of us. Okay, and I'm not putting this down as something that's minor. I don't believe it's minor. That's why I call for the special meeting. That's why we've entertained, I can't tell you how many emails that we've entertained and conversations I've had personally with people, but it's something very important. I'm optimistically looking forward to some enhanced enforcement out there this year. And I think that the conversations and the exercise that we've gone through so far has hopefully inspired that. I think what we do this year, we should line up for next year. But here we are. April's upon us. I think we're not in a position to reinvent the wheel in a timely manner. I think there's every time we have these conversations, something else is learned, something else is discovered. but they've been great conversations. And this is what Middletown does. This is what, over the years that my tenures on the council, and I'm sure the vice president and councils that have been here for a while, Council Santos and Von Villas, will agree that by venting and being civil with one another, we get to where we want to go. And we'll get to where we want to go. But I think this is something that we should be working on this year to implement next year. I don't think we're going to get there. I don't think we're going to get there in the timely fashion that we want to be there. And I don't think it's with everything that we have in front of us right now. We have a budget to put together. We have a budget that Mr. Brown's going to be presenting to us in a matter of weeks that we're going to be going through. And I don't believe that we have the time to continue to deal with this in the manner that we've had so far. And again, I'm not simplifying this. I see you, Councilor Von Villas. I see you, Mr. Vice President. Okay, I just want to finish my thoughts. I think it's important for us to maybe enact this group, this task force. I think this is something that should be done through Mr. Brown and the police department. I think that's probably the best place for it. And we'll see where we go from there. But I think today, once again, I think we've certainly done our due diligence. We've certainly listened to our residents. We certainly have taken the time to understand this. I understand it a lot better now. I mean, I might join Strom and take my long-term rental and turn it into a short-term rental after all these conversations. I just say that anyway. But it's just amazing the things that I've learned through this process. You know, it's really it's something. But have we had an issue? Yes, we've had. Has it been unfairly pointed at a majority of the short-term rental proprietors? Perhaps. And it shouldn't be, because for the most part, and we learned that most of them do what's right and most of them care. You know, I've talked to, and I refer to him as the godfather of short-term rentals in Middletown, Chris Souza. I've talked to Chris on a number of occasions, you know, and him and I have had some good conversations, you know, and for the most part, every proprietor that I've spoken to out there really cares. They don't want to be disruptive in our community. They want to be part of the community. They want to be part of our fabric. They want to be part of what Middletown is. So I see it from both sides. And then I turn around and I see the Jay Redford, you know, and I see the Connery, the Rob Connerys, what they've gone through. And these are things that we cannot tolerate. And we as councils have to make sure, and we have to charge our town administrator with making sure that those situations do not exist, or if they do happen, that they're dealt with appropriately. So I'm going to get off of my STR horse tonight, and I'm going to go to the Vice President who had his hand up prior to Councilor Von Villas. Go ahead, Vice President.
Thank you, Bob. I did want to, I'm glad that we're taking this path. I feel the same way as you do as this discussions have progressed. I think that, you know, we don't have enough accurate information to make informed decisions at this point. However, I would like to see that the task force and define you know, what their role will be, because I think they working together, I think they mean it. I think they're it'll be beneficial. But at the same time, we still have a season, and a season upon us. So, you know, as you said, we've got to make sure that the enforcement, so that the Mr. Redferns and the Mr. Connerys and any other folks that out there, the Mr. Tituses, you know, those things are dealt with, and they're dealt with swiftly, appropriately, and they're corrected, because it's just not right for those folks either, you know. And I think if we do that, hopefully with the task force, with taking our time and getting in solid information, And then, we tackle this thing in the fall with the task force. And I would love to be on that task force. I'd love to be, I've learned so much about this. I think that I would like to be part of that, if that's possible. And so, but enforcement has to be, the key going forward, not just these season, every season, but for this season, as we gather accurate information, so we can make an informed decisions, fair decisions, for everybody involved, and we hopefully create that balance between STRs and our neighborhoods. And again, I agree with you. I've learned that a lot of them are, the majority of them are doing the right thing, and they are our residents. So I think it's the right path. I appreciate your comments, everybody's comments, Mr. Welch, Mrs. Vaughn, Mrs. S, and most importantly, the residents' comments. I think it's beneficial for all of us. So I'm in favor of extending it, sitting where we're at right now, getting with the task force and creating this task force, defining it and gathering accurate information. And then we can come up with, I think, a solid ordinance that is fair and beneficial to everybody.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Von Bills.
Yes, I agree with what both you and Paul have said. And I think one of the most important things that came forward is the fact that we're not going to try to do things in a hurry, that we're really looking at that next year's season. But to get to next year's season, to make it work properly, what we have to do is we have to take educated steps along the way as to how to get there, defined steps along the way. When I talk about a plan, when I talk about a timeline, I'm not talking about just, oh, we need to get this done, whatever, blah, blah, blah. The fact is that what do we want to achieve by such and such a time? What do we want to achieve by such and such a time, so that we end up with what we need at the time when we need it? And that's why I think a timeline is important at this point, because we could find ourselves 3 months from now just talking again, 6 months from now just talking again, and next year not being any better off. So what we have to do is define the steps. Where do we want to be at the end, and how do we get there? We develop a plan. And I think the town administrator is the person that probably is just the biggest picture with that.
Okay. Councilor Welch.
So I think to move forward down this road, what we all seem to agree on is the task force. So I'm probably not the person to word it, but I think it's probably a good idea that we can walk away from this meeting having made the first step by making a motion to create the task force.
Okay.
I don't know what the right components are or how to say it properly, but that feels like that's what we should do.
I think you said it just fine, and I'm going to second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to create a task force. And we'll put it on, and I want to do this. I'm not trying to tap the brakes too hard, but I want to put it on our April 5th docket. We need a little bit of breathing room with some other things, some housekeeping that we need to get active on. So I'll put it on our April 5th docket just to create a task force. Not to get into a lot of detail, but we could dissect this all night, Councilor Von Villas. And I don't want to do that tonight. To create one, to form one. In the meantime, Mr. Brown will come up with some ideas. And it's easy always to, it's always easy to say Mr. Brown, Mr. Brown, Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown has a lot on his plate. Believe me, I spend a lot of time with Mr. Brown daily, and Mr. Brown has a lot on his plate. But this is important, but I think it should be something we'll put on our April 5th docket to just initiate the task force. Councilor Von Villas.
I would just recommend that in the motion that is made at that time, that it is defined exactly who or how many or whatever would be composed of that task force. Because making a motion about a task force is too open-ended. Someone has to determine a number of people were brought up, a number of different volunteers, people who said that they would be willing. From my perspective and from dealing with lots and lots of issues like this with committees, what you have to do is you have to have a workable number, not too big, not too small, representative of all of the constituencies, but you need to define that before within the motion. That's all I'm suggesting. When the motion is made, please identify what the constituency would be.
I'll be looking forward to hearing from you that night, Councilor Von Villas. Councilor Welch.
Time.
Can I amend my motion to have Mrs. Von Villas do everything she just said and bring that to the April 5th meeting?
You certainly can. I'll second that amendment.
Oh, God.
Thank you for volunteering, Councilor Von
Thank you,
Villas.
Mrs. Von Villas.
We have a motion. It's been seconded. We have a motion with an amendment that's been seconded. All in favor to the original motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
To those to the amended motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I didn't see your hand, Mrs. Von Villas.
I saw her hand. She voted in the affirmative. Okay, Mr. Vice President.
Okay, thank you, everybody, and motion to adjourn.
And we'll see everybody Thursday night.
All right.
Second.
All in favor?